just to get these guys finished. Not much to do, really, or nothing too complicated. Just a process of coming back with the original base colours for the clothing and the armour and things. Pretty thinned paint again. Juquero orange for these orange overalls, kind of workwear stuff. Probably wait till we kind of finish the overall painting before I go back and do some corrections or fixes where I've gone over the edge back onto the skin. Might as well wait till everything's done. And in general, a couple of passes at this stage. Got to try and get the colour back a bit from the Vrakks Earthshade. If you wanted to, you could just leave it after applying that shades, but I find that the miniatures end up getting a bit dark. I think it's at least worth just coming back with the base paints if you can, even if you don't want to go into the brighter colours. It's sometimes worth just reinstating the original. And then the Troll Slayer orange, start brightening up that orange colour. Does make a nice difference, that one. Got the option of finishing the orange completely and then moving on to the yellows, or building them up at the same time. Doesn't really matter, whatever works best. I used to not like trying to paint an orange colour, but having done these before in other miniatures with this particular sets of paints, it seems to work okay. Make sure to thin the paint, it goes on nicely in a couple of layers. Maybe not entirely necessary, but a little bit of Fire Dragon Bright, some of the raised areas. And I don't need it to stand out too much. So when it goes on, it can be a bit obvious when it's going on without any mixing with the previous layer. It can look a bit heavy-handed as a highlight, meaning the jump from the Troll Slayer orange up to this Fire Dragon Bright can be quite obvious. You can obviously mitigate that by mixing it together on the palette, but I don't want to get into that. So all I'm going to do is just add it where it needs to go, on the edges or raised areas, and it can be a bit heavy-handed, a bit clumsy, and I'll maybe just exaggerate what I'm talking about here for the purposes of showing what I do next. I just want to get the highlight on, so a bit heavy-handed as you can see, and then use the previous paint, the Troll Slayer orange, thinned, and then I can come in and just knock back that highlight a bit, leave some of it showing in the extremes, but I'm looking to just feather out those kind of obvious brush strokes, and that can really improve it. I suppose that's one of my most commonly used methods when I'm painting and dealing with highlights. So I mean, I'm not going over all of it, I'm just where I want it to blend better with the previous layer, and it gives you quite a lot of control over the effect. Now onto the yellow with the Averland Sunset again. Just nice to have these consistent colours across all the unit. even though they are all different and they've got slightly different equipment, giving them these same colours really pulls them together. And again, just doing a couple of thin coats of it. Uriel yellow to get the brightness back there. Always got to be careful not to overwork the yellow. Always find it dries a bit quicker than some of the other paints. You can start to make a mess of it just with the brush strokes. So I'll tend to just do one pass and make sure that dries before going back over it again. You can also use a bit of the Flash Gets Yellow just to bring up a bit of an edge highlight. Nothing too elaborate. But with the yellow done, that's essentially the clothing and armour pieces all finished. Barring some weathering, some chipping maybe. And you can see each one of them has that scheme, some orange and then a bit of yellow for a bit of detail on them, and it works quite well. So I think that's everything essentially painted now. The last thing that I'm going to do, or maybe the second last, or third, is a little bit of dry brushing for the metal items. Just got to try and avoid all the other colours now. There's going to be places where I can't get the dry brush into, so I'll come back just with the normal detail brush and pick some of those other smaller metal parts out. Just want to make sure I don't have too much on here when I do this. It's amazing how far it goes. Okay, getting to the finishing stages on these. The chipping, I'm going to try and use, well, I will use this chipping colour. Really nice paint for getting started with the chipping. Normally I use a small sponge and go over miniatures with that. These guys, I'm going to struggle. I mean, there's only limited areas where I need to do this. Maybe up on the red on the backpack here, the flamer fuel. And once you start doing this, you're going over nicely painted areas normally, and you've kind of got to commit to the look while not spoiling other areas like the clothing and the skin. Can even look quite nice on the general metal work on a gun, for example. It just starts to break up the kind of perfect finish, just adds some general wear and tear, which is nice. But I do find that this stuff dries to a really nice tone as a chipped paint. For example, that red tool there, just on the gun casing as well. This guy's got some sort of yellow tank on his back, so a few splodges here and there. This guy with his metal arm, and we just go over that also. This guy's little hand chainsaw thing. This guy with the yellow chest armour, probably going to have to do the majority of that with a small brush just to try and keep control of it, as I don't want to go down on the skin at all. Just think some little dabs along the outside edges generally does it. And then just a touch of silver paint into those areas where you've done some of the chipping colour. Again, doesn't need to be everywhere. All helps just give the indication of newer damage. Okay, last thing for the minis now. Some rust onto the metal parts. I'm going to use the enamel, I think this is the Humbrol Rust Wash, with some enamel thinners. And because it's well thinned, it'll just run into all the crevices and things, and hopefully dry to a nice rusty weathered look. Don't need to put loads on, just enough to leave a bit of that tone. So really getting there now with these miniatures. Starting to look pretty much what I was hoping for. I certainly like the variety of them. I think that's the main appeal for me with a unit like this. It's the opportunity for having a bit of fun, creating some unique minis. And then I usually tend to go over the bases with Agrax Earthshade, thin down, which, to be honest, I'm not sure I need this stage. I'm going to have to try a version sometime without doing this. The reason being that the weathering powders that I'll add next tend to cover up most of it. Okay, the last bit of painting needed on these guys is the banner. And it looks like quite a good size of banner. Once you kind of draw something out on paper, it doesn't look quite as big. But I'm planning on using some decals to construct some sort of design on here. I've got a good collection of sheets of old decals and things from other sets. Found a nice star that will look quite good, because as I've said, I want the banner to be kind of work related. These guys are miners, and they're kind of representing their company in a way. So the star is a background symbol. What I'm thinking of using is maybe one of these fists here, if I were to cut that out with a scalpel, and then maybe convert one of these scythes into a mining pick, you know, the sort of thing shown on one of the miniatures there. So like the fist would be holding that, whatever colour I go for, and then I can paint in the other side of the pick, and that would be like the central symbol on the banner. And then I noticed that there's some words down here, and Necromunda being one of them in a nice font. So I could have Necromunda across the top, and then using some of these letters I could cut them out individually, and I think there's enough there to make Mining Co. So we end up with Necromunda Mining Co., which would be the mining company on, or one of the mining companies on Necromunda. And Necromunda is that general setting that I'm using for all my terrain builds and kit bashing and things like that, so that'll fit in. So I thought I would give that a go, but the first thing would be to try and get the star on there, and I didn't think it would be as big as it is. It's going to overhang a bit too much. But it's a nice starting point, so I don't want to dismiss it, just to establish that big symbol in the middle. So I'll maybe just trim it top and bottom a little bit, just so it's running off. So I'll maybe trim the top and bottom points to get that to fit on there. So you can see that I'm trying to get the decal to stick to the banner, which is all uneven. and it'll probably do not a bad job, but maybe just to help it along, I'll use a little bit of the micro sol. Just paint that onto the decal, and it should soften it up and get it to conform better to that shape. And you can see that it saves a little bit of hassle in terms of painting a nice neat geometric shape like that, especially over the folds and wrinkles of the banner. And then with a nice new blade on the scalpel, try and chop out one of these clenched fists here. It'd be interesting to see if this works as a technique for putting together a design. Certainly not tried it before. And then for the shape of the pick itself, I might just use the black one as a starting point. Again, I can always paint over it. Okay, so that's those little elements of decals on, and you can see where I can add the other side of this to make it into a pick of some sort. So that's a view there of the finished banner. Give it a very light wash of sepia just to age it a little bit. But in general, it gives you maybe an idea of what you could do if you've got some spare decals and you need to make a banner, repurpose them into something else. So the last thing to do now is finish the bases and then take a look at the end result. Yeah, so here's the finished unit of 30 mutants, the newer models up front. Really happy how they've turned out. I think it's quite fun having the banner, the standard bearer, and the new ones fit in nicely with the old ones. Similar look to them, and overall makes for a nice cohesive unit with that paint scheme. Looking at the army lists in the Siege of Vrakks books, I think about 140 points for a unit of this size, and that's in the old money, probably of no use in the modern games at all, of 40k, but nonetheless it's been something I've been wanting to make and put together, and it would form part of a wider renegade militia army in that 40k theme. Ideal for the Ash Wastes. They're going to appear in things I make in the future, certainly around those mining facilities, with the overall Necromunda theme for the environment. And once I make some mining facilities in terms of the terrain, these will be great miniatures to have spilling out. Perhaps some facility workforce that has mutated over time. I think there'd be all sorts of scenarios that you could build around a unit like this. And also just lumping them in with larger chaos forces. It would be great to see them being driven up the centre of a gaming table just as a meat shield throwaway unit for a bit of fun, seeing how they get on. So that's the end of this series on the Mutant Rabble. Hopefully the videos have been of some use to you. And of course, in any case, thanks very much for watching the video.